The Philadelphia Eagles will be making a trade in round one of the 2024 NFL draft. Well, that's what everybody is telling me. So today I want to go over three names that I think the Eagles definitely should trade up for if they're in the market. So let's get into it.
You want Philly food? Yeah, let's do it.
On you guys, it's your boy Joe Castro, aka Philly Fresco, and it is another episode of Philly the podcast. So today I want to talk, man, we have a lot to go over, but today we're just going to talk about trades. So the Philadelphia Eagles have been connected to a lot of different type of trades. We've heard offensive lineman, we heard wide receiver, we heard cornerback, we've heard everything. We've heard everything along the lines of the Eagles want to move up. Even going as far as Daniel Jeremiah saying that he thinks that there's a 70% chance that the Eagles move up, about a 30% chance that they move down, and a 0% chance that they even stay at number 22. So before we get into all this content, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe. I have a very special interview at the end of this, so definitely stick around for that. If you don't want to hear my opinions on the trade market, you can go ahead and click to that interview. I will have timestamps below. But I want to start with a guy that a lot of people have been talking about and I think would make a lot of sense for the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, you look at what happened this free offseason in general, not just free agency, but you look at who we've gained, who we've lost, and you look at that edge position. I mean, look, the defensive line is a position that the Eagles really put all their chips in. We know this. We know that they like to have great edge rushers. They like to have great interior defensive linemen. Their defense kind of goes off of what their defensive line is. So losing a guy like Hassan Reddick is definitely a big loss. We obviously replaced him, but at the end of the day, Bryce Huff, we don't know what he is, right? We don't know if he's going to be a 10-sack guy perennially. We knew we had that in Hassan Reddick. So while I'm excited about the youth movement that we have on this defensive line, I do think that they need to add some talent to it. So that brings up my first trade, and that would be to move up. And all these trades, I'm not saying exactly where I would go, but I think that if you can go anywhere from like 15 to 18, somewhere around there, I think that you can give up not too much and you still get a premier player. So the first guy is going to be Jared Verse. I think that Jared Verse would make a ton of sense for this Eagles team. Obviously a very good pass rusher coming out of FSU. He's lean. He's a guy that can bend around the edge very well. He's going to be violent. He's going to be physical. He's a guy that if you put him into a rotation right now, I think that he's going to give you some very good numbers. So it would be very interesting to see how far they'd have to go up. Now, people look at, Dallas Turner. They look at Jared Verse. They look at Latu. There's some guys in this draft class. Even if you want to go maybe a little bit later, day two, depending on where they fall, you got Chris Braswell, Braylon Trice. You got a lot of good edge guys. But once you get out of day two, realistically, I think that your options really start to dwindle and you're starting to look at projects, right? And I know Eagles fans don't love projects, but that's what you're looking at. You're looking at projects. So I think that if you want to get yourself a premier pass rusher in this draft, you're going to have to move up. And I think that it makes sense to move up for a guy like Jared Verse. Now, the second one, people might not agree with this, and I understand it. It is what it is, but it's offensive line. Now, it's not the sexiest of picks, right? It's not the most amazing you're not going to sit there and pound the table and say, we just got an offensive lineman in the first round. Let's go. I know it's not going to be sexy, but it makes a lot of sense. The Philadelphia Eagles, while they do, their defense starts on their D-line, their offense starts on their O-line. We've had the blessing and the graciousness of having a guy like Stoutland on this team for so long, just making our offensive line so good. We've had a lot of talent come in those doors, and maybe it makes sense to go ahead and add even more talent. Now, you can look at guards, you can look at centers. I would look at a guy like Troy Fautanu. If he drops to like 15, 16, 17, I think that you make some calls and you start saying, hey, maybe we grab him. He can start at guard for you right away, and then he can turn into your tackle replacement, for a guy like Lane Johnson. So it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways for the Eagles to go ahead and put more capital into that position. Again, I know that it wouldn't be the sexiest position, sexiest pick in the first round, especially trading up for it. But I think that it makes sense, and I think that the Eagles would be smart to, at the very least, make some calls if they are in the market for an offensive lineman. Again, this is a position that I feel like you have like 8 or 9 guys that can go in the first 2 days. And that might be even a low number, to be 100% honest. There's a lot of really good offensive linemen. But if you want a guy that's going to be a day one starter, once you get out of the second round, you're going to be kind of fishing. So I don't want to be fishing. If you're gonna get an offensive lineman, you might as well go ahead and get the best one available, or at least one of the best ones available. Trust Stoutland. This is where if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm really trusting Stoutland, because do not get me wrong, there are guys, off the top of my head, I'm thinking Christian Jones, I'm thinking Kieran from BYU. There's some guys that might be there day 3, and if Stoutland goes up to you and says, "Don't worry about me round 1. Go do what you got to do. I want this guy day 2, day 3." You trust Stoutland, and you say, okay, that's who you want, that's who you get. Now, at the end of the day, if you want to go up there and get somebody that can dual roles for you, right? He can be your starting guard, then go out there and kick out to the right tackle once Lane Johnson is moving on. Then I think that you do need to move up for that position. And I think that Troy Fautanu makes a lot of sense for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the last one is actually going to deal with the guy that I had the interview today with, which is Josh Davis of the Philly Special. We spoke today about basically the draft. We talked about what he would want to see happen, his dream scenario, his nightmare scenario. We even went into the Shark Tank a little bit, so you'll see what that means. But we did talk about Kenyon Mitchell, and I don't want to give away too much of the cookies of the interview, but we both agree that if you want to move up and go ahead and get a Kenyon Mitchell, we would be all for it. I think all Eagles fans would be all for it. I don't want to give too much of an explanation, because I think that Josh did a great job of doing that himself. But there is something that we all agree on. If you want Kenyon Mitchell, it's going to be very, very doubtful that you get him at number 22. So he's going to be a guy you're going to have to move up to. Again, maybe anywhere from like 15 to 18. I'm hoping he drops into that, area. And if he does, let's get it. Go ahead and grab him. But I think that you guys should definitely listen to what Josh Davis said about why he would want a Kenyon Mitchell and what he would say to Howie Roseman. I thought it was very, very intuitive. So I do want to get into that. I appreciate you guys listening. If you guys have any opinions on who you would want, who you think we should trade up for, do you just want to stay at number 22, take the BPA? Do you want to move back? Let me know in the comments. But let's get into this interview. And again, shout out to my guy Josh Davis for coming on and doing this for me, man. Amazing channel. So definitely go show him some love. But let's get into it. I am joined with a very good friend. You guys already know him. If you don't know who this guy is, you guys are living under a rock at this point. But I'm here with my guy Josh Davis. So I'm Philly the podcast. He's the Philly Special. We're basically cousins at this point, right? But what's going on, Josh? How you doing, brother?
What's up, bro? Yeah, I'm doing well. It's exciting because this is literally like Christmas Day for adults.
Seriously.
The kids love Christmas, but for us, especially NFL talk and everything else, we're talking about pre-show. Like all the build-up, the anticipation, speculation, all that. Like it's over very soon. I mean, we're about to be there, figure out what the Eagles get. So I am super excited, and it's great. Always talking birds with you, man. So this is great.
No, I love having you on the show, man. I lay my hat on that. I knew you were going to be special when you came into this game. So it's always fun having you back on the show. But there is a lot to talk about. I mean, we talked about it a little bit pre-show. We've talked about it through the weeks. This is wide open. This draft is wide open. So I want to go over a couple things with you. I want to kind of get your opinion and kind of pick your mind on what you're feeling with this draft. And I want to start realistically right now. I want to be right here, right now, where we are. What are your thoughts about where the Eagles are as a team headed into this draft?
I mean, I'm honestly very optimistic. It's not surprising, yes, for people that know me. I try to be optimistic about a lot of things, but like legit, this is a very optimistic time period because, I mean, if we take a look back, obviously we remember what happened in the cataclysmic fall off a cliff ending of our 7-week stretch of, losing 6 games and all that. So, I mean, but like we got to remember the past to hopefully get better in the present or the future. But like, the new coordinators, to me, I think it starts with that. Like the fact that we have Kellen Moore on the offense, is going to drastically change things, which is incredible. And then also, then you start going through the pieces that Howie's acquired, and it's I mean, Saquon Barkley for sure, the top of the list, offensive weapon, changes things for the defense. You can't just say, hey, Jalen beat us with passing, because all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, hey, Saquon Barkley is going to run into a non-loaded box for the first time in his career in the NFL. So it's like, hey, this changes dynamics. And then also you talk about Kellen Moore going to have his offense under center. Jalen's going to be there. That is going to be shocking to me when we finally see that. I'm like, what? When has that happened last time? So getting that type of element in there, as well as play action and everything else, it just changes up so much for the offense. And then again, on the flip side, you can talk about the defense the same way. You wanted this flavor of Vic Fangio, but again, like, as we all know, there's not really anything in terms of just like you get a similarity, but it's not the legit true thing when you've got the father of the system and it's the Fangio scheme himself. So bringing him in, even though, yes, there's some holes, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that with the draft and how we can possibly get some of those players to help with that. You still talk about there's potential playmakers on this team. How I went and got a lot of low risk, high reward type of players on the defense, and Fangio can put those guys in the right spots. So that's what I'm hopeful for. I'm excited. I think all the moves that Howie did there made a lot of sense. The Haas one is hard to come to terms with because everyone loves Reddick, and totally understandable. I do too. At the time, I'm like, man, you really can't afford to lose him because of the leadership and everything that he brings on the defense. But as you start to see some of the other moves, CJ Garner-Johnson coming back, it's like, okay, it's got to make sense financially. Howie Roseman's making his decision to go a certain direction. And at the end of the day, we can totally disagree with him. We can say it's a bad move. We can have that opinion. However, I'm not going as far to say like, oh, I don't trust Howie Roseman. He's an idiot anymore, because he's totally proven it. If he's made some mistakes, sure, but he's also learned it. And that's where I'm hoping that, in this draft, he is done some self-reflection and we might actually do something that he's never done before. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes back to now he's in a position to be able to kind of, do whatever, something that he hasn't done before, because we talked about it earlier. Now you're way more flexible in what you want to do or what you can do in the first round of the NFL draft. So I agree with you 100%. It's going to be interesting to see what way he goes. Does he give Fangio some more playmakers? Does he give his offense some more help? I mean, how much more help do they need at this point? But, hey, we'll take some more people, I guess.
If you want to.
So I guess I think this is fair to say. I think that this free agency was our dream scenario. I think obviously losing Hassan Reddick sucks. It really does suck. But everything else, I mean, getting the guys that we were able to do, to me, was a dream scenario. I love this free agency. So I want to ask you, staying on that dream scenario, I'm not going to wake you up yet. What would your dream scenario be going into this first round? Is there a certain player, a certain trade? What would be your perfect first round for the Eagles?
I mean, I guess it depends on how far we want to make this dream or fantasy, Joe, because if I go to the extreme, then I would say like Quinyon Mitchell, magically the NFL has forgotten his name, or he's slipped through the board. They're like, oh, I guess he's not available. He's just already been taken, and he falls to 22. Is that a dreams don't necessarily have to be realistic. So I guess they technically could count, although I would say a little bit more on a realistic dream side. I would even say Howie Roseman trading up to 16 to get Quinyon Mitchell. I get the arguments made on both sides of Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, the whole SEC thing. So, there's like a war, and you can even probably tell in my answer here, but there's like a war going on internally between myself of, does Howie Roseman get Quinyon Mitchell, or does he side with the SEC bias, which is totally understandable, and that he's even talked about recently, competition and all that of Terrion Arnold? Either way, it's a corner, but yeah, I would say for me, dream scenario is get Quinyon Mitchell, whether that is at 16, whether if, again, magically somehow he were to fall to 22 and you don't have to give up capital, that would be unreal.
Yeah, I've loved Quinyon Mitchell since I've seen him. I watched his tape a little bit before the Senior Bowl just to kind of get an idea of who I was going to be looking at. I looked at everybody, but he stood out to me. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, okay, this guy is nice. And as soon as he started going out there and balling out at the Senior Bowl, me and James, I do the best enemy with James. We were both out there. We both said it. We were like, this kid is not going to be available when the Eagles or the Cowboys draft. So it was nice being able to see him. But you're 100% right. It is definitely a realistic possibility that the Eagles move up. We have heard that they're looking to move up. We heard Daniel Jeremiah, who's worked with Howie, and whenever he says something about Howie, I kind of tend to believe what he says. But he said that they're looking to move up for an offensive lineman. That was as early as this morning. So who knows what's going to happen, but there's definitely a possibility that the Eagles move up. I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I want to know, how far would you move up? I know you said 16, but how far are you if at number 10 you have to give up your second round pick and maybe a second round pick next year? Are you that all in on a Kenyon Mitchell, or does it still have to kind of be palatable? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I think to me, 12 is probably as early as I would go. It's still even at 12, I'm like, gosh, that's gonna be probably a lot to move up to that scenario in that spot. But I think with 11 and having Minnesota sitting there, it does make a lot of sense knowing and thinking that they're gonna take quarterback. So it changes things of saying you probably don't have to go up so high. I mean, if Quinon goes before that, then you know what? All bets are off. Like
Yeah.
he's too good. You're not gonna pay for him. Hopefully he doesn't turn out into the next Sauce Gardner, but still like there's you got to wait a little bit. And I think if the quarterback market is very high or it's hot and someone actually wants to say, oh, hey, the Vikings may get their guy, let's go ahead and trade up and get him at 10. And then all of a sudden the dominoes kind of fall there. It could help Philly in that regard. But if not, I would say, again, probably 12 is the absolute earliest. But again, if we can do it with Seattle, I like that mock draft or that mock scenario because it's been thrown out a ton by now. But it's, you get Seattle 16, you get their 81, and then you trade away 22 and 53. They need to get into the second round because they don't have one. We get back into the third round because we don't have one. It makes a lot of sense for both sides. So some mutual interest. That is the dream scenario in terms of if you're going to trade up. But yeah, I would say 12 is probably the absolute highest I would be willing to go.
I like that. I like that. Now, so we dreamed a little bit. We had some fun. Now I got to take you out of that dream state a little bit. You've
Why
done
you do that to me?
you've done a bunch of mock drafts. Some really good ones. Really, really good. You have a really good show, Josh. I think that's where we're getting right. But no, you've done a lot of mock drafts. I've done a lot of mock drafts. So I think we've both heard this a million times. That's never gonna happen. You're crazy. I would hate to see that for round one.
No.
Nobody says that, right? No Eagles fans ever get mad.
Everyone's experts.
No, so I want to ask you, what would be, because we all have it. We all have that one thing that we're like, I really hope Howie doesn't do this.
Mhm.
What would be your nightmare scenario, the opposite of a dream? What would happen in the first round and you would just be like, what the heck are we doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, shout out to Thomas Mock because we were talking about this yesterday, and I asked him the similar scenario, and he's like, "Oh, we can't take Brock Bowers." And to your point, people are, "Oh, that's terrible," because everyone has an opinion. I totally respect that. Hey, you know what? No one really knows for sure. That's the beauty of the draft. I would say I'm on board similarly. I don't think that we need to take a Brock Bowers or a tight end super early. If he were to fall unbelievably far back and maybe if magically he's available there at 22, yes, you absolutely have to consider him, the talent and everything else, but something weird happened if he's back there at 22. So that's one of those. But to me, honestly, I would say the nightmare scenario, and this is kind of crazy because I do like a lot of receivers. I know this is a receiver draft, but the whole idea, and I think Dan Graciano of ESPN was the first one who brought this up, but Howie interested or intrigued possibility of trading up to get a receiver early. It's like, please don't take a receiver in the first round. I mean, I understand positional value. I know you could look at AJ Brown and the possibility of, in a couple years, but it's too early. And especially talking what we did about a couple of the draft positions or the positions of need to go ahead and say, hey, give me Brian Thomas or whoever you want to insert in there because I'm going to trade up or I'm going to, move some draft capital to go get my wide receiver 3, which is effectively was Quez Watkins. I mean, like, come on. We've already upgraded just based on the fact that he's out of here. And sorry, because I could just never stop bashing Quez in that sense. But still, like, we've already upgraded. You can get your guy if you want him in the second round. If you trade back, you have a third round pick. You can get a receiver there, or even later in the draft. Like Anaya Smith of A&M has been a guy that's been linked quite a bit to Philly. So I like the options on that side. I would say the nightmare scenario, probably receiver. Some people have asked if it'd be O-line, but I can't say that's a nightmare scenario just because, we all know, a very vast majority of us know the trenches win. Is it a sexy pick? No. Am I going to put on a fake smile and be like, yeah, this is great. Yes, I will do that. But it's not the nightmare scenario of, oh my gosh, what are we doing? We don't need this. This is way too much of a luxury pick that we cannot afford.
I 100% agree with you. I'm not going to lie to you. And it's funny because if we took a wide receiver at 22, I would be upset. I would be like, we didn't need to do that. But if we trade up and get a wide receiver, I would lose my mind. I would be
Yeah.
so mad. I would be so mad. And realistically, I'm one. I asked this question on Twitter, and a lot of people disagree with me, but I'm one to say I think that if we can get four, you know, God, willing, we can get five top 100 picks. I think that holds more value than just the 22 pick alone. There's a lot of good players in this draft. So if the Eagles were to
Mhm.
go ahead and waste more capital to go and get a wide receiver 3 that, like you said, is going to be realistically what the fifth, sixth option in this. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I know that we see rumors that the Eagles are working on a extension with AJ Brown now. That's from Howard Eskin. I don't know how. It's hard
Mhm.
for me to really believe a lot of stuff that people say because there are so many rumors, right? There,
Oh, yeah.
we've
Oh,
heard
yeah.
offensive line, defensive line. I told you earlier, we might be getting a water boy in the first round. So you look at
Report
these,
stays per sources.
per source. But no, you look at all these rumors, you look at everything that people have been saying. Is there anything that sticks out to you that you're like, I could see that happening? Is there maybe a hot take that you have for this first round?
Yeah, I would say for sure with the rumors of trading up for a corner. Now we've heard the trading up for O line, so I guess could kind of throw that one in there as well. The absolute like guarantee in my mind, and I know Daniel Jeremiah has said it a couple different ones. I think the first time I saw it was whenever he's interviewing with John Clark, but hey, you're going to see Howie move, and you're likely going to see him trade up. Like I would say, I don't know if I put a percentage on it, I'm going to say 90% chance that Howie trades up to get a guy, 10% chance he trades back. There's no way in my mind that he sits at 22 and takes a pick, because if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 guys on your board, they're like, hey, they are worthy of a trade up. Then you just wait and see how the dominoes fall. If you're just like, oh, hey, one of them still available, boom, you trade up however high or likely he wants to. Go ahead and make that move. If they all get taken ahead of you, and all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, hey, there's not really an opportunity to trade back or trade up. You wait till 22 and you don't force it. How he's not going to do that. He's going to try to dictate terms. So he's like, you know what? I don't really love anybody here. Let's trade back, to your point. Let's get more capital, because the top 100, there's lots of guys to like. I mean, especially in that, yes, there's the range of 50, I love 40 to 50. I love. So if you trade back and get an extra a pick in that spot, and then also moving back to like 70 to 120. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
guys like wide receivers, corners, tackles, guards, positions of need for the Eagles. So yeah, if it doesn't fall perfectly for you to trade up, then it's going to be in a trade back scenario. But I think we'd better believe and count on 22 will not be a Philadelphia Eagles pick.
I just hope they pick in the first round. I'm not gonna lie. I don't
True.
want to be
Yes,
sitting
that
here.
would be.
I'm going live. I think you're going live as well with Thomas, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. I'm not trying to sit here and watch a whole draft of nobody that I want to see.
You don't do
But
4 hours to all of a sudden be like, oh, great, we didn't pick tonight. Well,
nothing
we'll
happened.
see you tomorrow
Awesome.
night.
Right. See you tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping for the best. I mean, but it's true. You brought it up, and that's why I say I feel like having more picks in that top 100, even top 120, I think you can go as far as that would be very, very valuable. You can get 3, 4, 5 real key starters in that top 120. I truly do believe that. So I'm excited to see what happens. Last question I want to ask you. All right, and I already think I know who the player is going to be. Probably know the scenario, but you're in the draft room. We're on the clock. We're at 22. Everybody that you could think of is available at 22. Who are you pitching to Howie Roseman to go ahead and draft? And I've been watching way too much Shark Tank as of late, if you can't tell. Give me your pitch. I want to see what you would say to Howie Roseman to draft your guy, and who would your guy be?
Let's go. I like this idea of an NFL draft Shark Tank. Yeah, so it would be Quinyon Mitchell. So I'm gonna be pitching to Howie here. And honestly, I'd be like, okay, look, we're sitting and I mean, sure, Howie knows a lot of these things, but I'm gonna be redundant. But yes, you got Slay, who's getting up there in age. At best case scenario, he's probably got 1 season left of legit production. He may have a couple years, but like legit production, I think let's be reasonable. 1 year left. James Bradbury did not prove anything, has not proved anything since the Super Bowl. You could argue, yes, defensive coordinator change. However, like, let's take a look at the confidence level and after post-game interviews and things like that. I get some serious concerns about, is he even going to be up to that level? So go ahead and get your cornerback of the future. You're going to need one regardless, like we talked about with age. You have Quinyon Mitchell, who is a difference maker on the field. Plus, take a look around the league and look at contracts that cornerbacks are signing for. Premium positional value is a big thing. So get a guy that you don't have to pay big money for. I know there's interest in Patrick Surtain, but you know what? Hey, if you can get a guy who was coached by Christian Parker, or Patrick Surtain was coached by Christian Parker, he's used to getting a dominant stud cornerback and turn him into very used to Vic Fangio's system. It works perfectly. I mean, this is the same scenario. Now, I know they're very different players, but still the same scenario that Patrick Surtain fell into of, hey, I'm coached by Christian Parker with Vic Fangio. You got Fangio, the father of the defense, and the scheme works beautifully. I know you like your guys of Terry and Arnold and your SEC production and all that. That's totally valid, but Quinyon Mitchell is different. Turn on the tape. Look at him. He's even matched up against Marvin Harrison Jr. You have some tape there to look at. So he's a dude who can cover the guys at the best of the level. Take a look at the Senior Bowl coverage. And also, I mean, it's fit scheme-wise. He's an off-ball coverage. He didn't do a whole lot of press man, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in a Fangio scheme. And then also, by the way, we can also tack on the fact that the first guy that Quinyon Mitchell mentioned is in terms of who does he watch, who does he mirror his game off of, is Darius Slay. Yep. So you talk about all the time, you want to get guys in early before someone retires. You got a situation of a Cam Jurgens with Jason Kelsey, hopefully getting a replacement for Lane Johnson. Do the same thing with your cornerback. Get a guy who mirrors Slay's game, can show him, look up close and personal, and play from day one. And then, oh, by the way, let's just go ahead and cut bait with James Bradbury.
Yeah, I like how you threw that in there. All right. While I'm going through the numbers, I like what you're saying, so I'm all in. I like it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I like it. Let's go. It's a deal. They always say something different on Shark Tank, so it is what it is, but it's a deal. I'm with it.
Sweet.
I love it. I think that this draft is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited for it. I'm always excited around draft time. It's a new beginning for the Philadelphia Eagles. But before we get you out of here, Josh, let them know where they can find you, what you do, who you are, just all that good stuff, so they can definitely go check you out.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate it, man. This is a blast as always. We got together, I think, back at the when you were at the Senior Bowl. You were showing up on the show there, so that was fun. I can't wait for the draft. But yeah, the Philly Special Show on YouTube, on Twitter, it's at the PHI Special, and that's about it. I mean, I'm on Instagram as well at that, but I'm terrible at checking Instagram. That's so bad because I've gotten like DM'd about it and like, bro, check your Instagram. I'm terrible, but yes, it's on Instagram at the PHI Special, also TikTok. But yeah, just trying to cover as much Eagles news and everything else as possible with a little bit of sarcasm every once in a while, throw in some little movie clips and all that. But it's been a blast. Appreciate you having me on, man. This is fun as always.
Definitely. And I'm sure we'll talk again after the draft. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. And I appreciate everybody tuned in. Be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe. As always, I definitely give my man the seal of approval. A great person, great content creator. So if you aren't following him, do me a favor and go on over there and follow him. But other than that, y'all know what it is, man. It is Fly Eagles Fly. And we are out here. Peace.
Everywhere. This is for you.
Fly Eagles flying.